look to your right, you can see the mountaintop of Masada. Right, it's this isolated mountaintop. So on the northern side, right, which is the side that we're looking at, so you can see these sort of steps. Right, that's that little step cliffs face. I don't know if that's the proper term. Is where Herod built his northern palace. Right, Herod was quite the engineer, quite the architect, and he decided, why? I have an idea. In an area where there's earthquakes and there's a mountain, how about I build a house or a palace right on the cliff, on multiple levels? I think that's a good idea. And this is exactly what he does. Now Herod builds a series of fortresses all along the border here, because this is the border of his kingdom, and it's also the border of the Roman Empire. Remember, it doesn't get any farther east, right, until the 2nd century, really. And so he needs to protect his kingdom and the Roman kingdom from the Parthians, right, from the Persian Empire. Now, in the year 73, the Roman 10th Legion, they come here. This is the last holdouts of Jewish rebels, right? It's been 3 years since they conquered Jerusalem, but this is now the last holdout. They come here with 14,000 soldiers, auxiliary legionnaires, and slaves, surround the mountaintop, right? And they have a problem, right? Because it doesn't matter how many men the Romans have, they're not going to fight them all at the same time against the Jewish rebels, right? Because the only way up the mountain, right, is up the snake path, right? This like two men abreast at best, right? This goat path, and you see this white snaking pathway that goes up the middle of the mountain, right? That was the only way up, right? That's how we're gonna get up. We're gonna walk up the snake path. We'll do it slowly, right? But when you gotta go up that, right? 14,000 men, right? It's two at a time, and the people, the 900 Jews up on the fortress above, they can just shoot arrows at you, throw rocks down at you, right? They can hold them off forever. So the Romans need to come up with another idea, another way to get up to the top of the mountain. And so what they do is they build a cable car, which is still the cable car that we are using to this day. That really shows you how great the Roman engineering is, right? I'm joking, they didn't build a cable car. What they did, instead of a cable car, I'm sure they would have liked a cable car, but instead of a cable car, they built a siege ramp, right, on the other side of the mountain that allowed them to bring up a siege tower and start knocking down the walls, right? And that is still standing, and we will see that, right, on our tour up there. So, looking out to our east, all right, we see, right, the Roman 10th Legion. They come here with 14,000 soldiers, legionaries, auxiliaries, thousands of slaves, and they surround the mountaintop. Right, and they build these square outlines, these rock outlines, right? Those are the remains of Roman camps. Right, we see 3 over here, right? And there's more on the other side, right, which we'll see. Now, in addition to the 3 camps, right, they built a circumvallation wall, right? That it's a siege wall that doesn't allow anybody in or out, right? And you can see the circumvallation wall, the remains of it, right in front of the camps. You see these long lines, right, of rocks. Right, and every like 10 meters or so, there'll be like a large pile. That would have been like a lookout tower, right? A little elevated platform for the guard, right? So we can see, right, that wall circles the entire mountain, right? The whole base. All right, everybody see this? Yeah. Right. From here, you can understand the military advantage, right, that the defenders had against 14,000 troops, right? Because if all that Roman legion is going to go up that pathway, right, it's very easy to throw rocks, to shoot arrows, right? And then they got to try to, say they get all the way up here, then you got to try to bust through this gatehouse, right? And it's not so easy, right? But this was the original pathway, and this was the way you come in and out the gatehouse. We're going to walk through it, and we're going to continue along the concrete pathway. One thing I forgot to tell you about the Dead Sea is that because the Dead Sea is actually receded so much, the Dead Sea has split in 2. Right, the southern and northern section, there used to be a peninsula jutting out from the Jordanian side, right? And that peninsula, which is right over here, has turned into a full land bridge, right? So right at this point, you could cross from one side to another without getting your feet wet. And so Israel actually, because of it, Israel's like the hotels of the Israelis and the Dead Sea Works Company, it's on the southern section of the Dead Sea, they needed to build a canal. And we can see the beginning of that canal right over there. Right, taking water from the northern section of the Dead Sea and then bringing it all the way to the south over there to the salt pools. Right, so this is This is unfortunately one of the things that happened because of the receding of the water. Over here on the right, this building with this is the monastery that the Byzantine monks built. Right after the Romans abandoned this place in the 2nd century, the only people that used it were Byzantine monks who were building these isolated monasteries out in the Judean desert, which was very popular at the time. All right, so we are up on Masada, which is a fortress / palace that King Herod builds for himself, one of many that he actually builds for himself. Right now, Herod is, right, he is crowned king by Augustus Caesar and the Roman Senate in the year 40 BC. Right, and right when he is crowned king, there is a rebellion and an invasion in his kingdom. Right, the Parthians, the Persian Empire, right, they invade his kingdom and they have local backing. Right, they have people from the previous dynasty, the Hasmoneans, right, the Maccabees. Right, they are leading this revolt, and Herod actually has to flee his kingdom. Right, he has to flee. He places his family up on Masada because this place was already identified by the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees, as a good fortress place, right? Because it's an isolated mountaintop from the mountains over here to our east, right? Very difficult to conquer. So he places his family up here, right? And then he goes to Egypt, right, to get help from his boss, Mark Antony, right, to help to deploy some Roman legions to repel the Parthians, all right, and the rebels, right? And it takes 3 years for Herod to quell this rebellion. Now, in the meantime, his family is up here, and Josephus tells us that they almost had to surrender to the besieging people down below because they were running out of water, right? The only water they had was anything they could collect in the cisterns, right? But this was direct rainfall on the mountain, and as you can imagine, there's not a lot of direct rainfall that comes here on the mountain. A lot of it is coming, right, the flash floods coming from the area over here. But at the last minute, Josephus tells us that the rains do come, right, and they're able to store up enough water until Herod is able to rescue them when he quells this rebellion in the year 37 BC. Right, so after this, right, he solidifies his control, but he's always going to know that he's going to remember that this rebellion takes place, right, and that his seat on the throne, right, is precarious, right, the sword of Damocles is always hanging over him, and so he doesn't necessarily want to have to run away to Egypt again if there's another rebellion, right, he wants to stay in his kingdom, so he's going to, right, this is going to be his Alamo, this is going to be the place that he runs to, right, in case there's a war, and he could direct from up here, right? There's going to be enough supplies, there's going to be enough water up here. He could be up for a long time and direct the war from up here. Now, one of the reasons why the Judeans rebel against Herod, right, is there are a few reasons. One, right, he is appointed by the Romans, so he's just simply a puppet of the foreign occupiers, right? But there's another reason. Herod, he's not a Judean. Right? He's not ethnically and nationally, he's not a Judean. He's not Jewish. What he is an Edomite. Edomites are people that lived in southern Israel. Right now, during the reign of the Maccabees, one of the Maccabean kings, he conquers the area of Edom, and he does something very unique. Right? Something very unique in Jewish history. He gives the people of Edom 3 choices. They could convert to Judaism, they could leave, or they could die. These are the choices. Right? Most of the Edomites left, right? But few of them decided to convert, right? And one of these, like the grandfather of King Herod, right, was one of these converts. So his religion was Jewish, right? But his nationality and ethnicity is not. And so this is something, right, that stuck in the craw of a number of Judeans, right? And he wasn't that religious, yes, because this is a guy who's building pagan temples all over the place, right? So add that on top of it. Right, but Herod, right, because of this problem, Herod, right, is a man who is sort of torn between 2 different worlds. Right, I'm sure a psychologist would probably love to get Herod on the couch, right, and start digging into that mind of his, right, and you can see this being torn in 2 different directions, being reflected in the palaces that he built for himself up here, right, because Herod builds not 1 but 2 palaces, because why build 1 when you can have 2 for twice the price? Right, he builds his 2 palaces are reflecting of the Jewish personality and the Roman personality. The Western Palace, which we're going to go visit in just a minute, it's built in the style of the Levant. Right, these large rectangular buildings with courtyards in the middle. right? No windows really, so people can't look in and see your wife or your daughters or anything like this, your women. The mosaic floors are in line with Jewish law, with halakha, which means that there's no graven images on them, right? No people, no gods, geometric patterns galore, right? Geometric patterns perfectly fine. We find these in the priestly houses in Jerusalem, right? And here we find them at Masada. So this is his Jewish palace. Now the northern palace, I like to call this his Roman palace, right? And when we go up there and you'll see the model, right? You'll understand why I call it the Roman. It's Roman in design, right? Roman in sort of the idea, right? It's also very Herodian because only Herod would have the chutzpah, right, to build a palace on the edge of a mountain, right? 3 different levels and in a place where you get earthquakes, right? But that's Herod for you, right? So right now what we're going to do, we're going to go into the palace. We're going to see some of the mosaic floors and some of the life that Herod afforded himself. And then we're going to come back here and we're going to learn about the rebellion. Any questions? As we enter into the palace, you'll see like this black line. This is the reconstruction line, right? This is how the archaeologists, everything below the black line was how the archaeologists found it. Everything above it was reconstructed, right, using the rocks that you saw that they found right next to it on the wayside. Now, remember how I said you wouldn't want to look at the field stones, right? You want to plaster it up, right? So here they were very eloquent, right? They plastered this up, but they wanted it to look as if it was hewn stone, right? As if they had quarried it from far away. They had paid masons, right? Does this look familiar to you guys? This style looks like the Herodian stone at the Western Wall, right? Like what the temple would have looked like. Same kind of idea, right? But here it's a little bit of an illusion, right? You want to think it's hewn stone, but it's really just plaster. We see here on the left-hand side a little channel to collect the rainwater and bring it into the cistern of the house. Again, this was the main way people collected water or had water, drinking water, is they would collect the rainwater, collect as much rainwater as possible, right, from the roofs and from the other areas around the buildings and channel it into a cistern. Now when we get into the courtyard, we're going to turn left and then walk up a flight of stairs. And we're going to see the mansion from the second floor. So here we can see, right, some of the beautiful, luxurious lifestyle that Herod had for himself. Right, we see the mosaic floor. Now this is just a hallway, right? The fact that you have mosaic floor and a hallway really shows you how rich you are, right? And even just the fact that most of it's white is still really expensive, right? But of course, what you're all, I'm sure, looking at is not the white part of the mosaic, right? But this beautiful geometric pattern, right? The rosette, that same image, right? Flowery sort of imagery that was very popular in Judea at the time of Jesus. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why are you going to spend all this money on this beautiful floor, or this amazing tile mosaic, and then cut off the corner of it with this ugly piece of stone, right? That is a very good observation. Good for you for noticing that, right? Herod would not have approved of that. That would have been like an off with his head moment. Herod would have seen this. The people that do this, right, are the rebels, right? Masada is actually one of the first places to fall in the war, starting in the year 66. Josephus says that the rebels used some sort of trickery. So they were probably pretending to be like some supply convoy, right? Because there was a small garrison here, right, overlooking the place. They're probably pretending to be some supply convoy. They overpower the guards, right? And Masada falls into rebel hands. And it becomes over the course of the next 7 years, will eventually become like a refugee camp, a place for Jews, mostly from Jerusalem and other places, fleeing, right, to get away. And depending on who you are in the rebel hierarchy, right, you might get to live in the palace, right? And if you're on the lower end, you'll live in the wall system, which we'll talk about later, right? But it wasn't like one family gets the whole entire palace. They're a little bit more egalitarian than that. You probably have like one family living in this hallway, one family living in that room over there, one family over here, right? And since this is where they're spending all their time, right, they're going to need things like a table, right, or a shelf, right, something they could eat on, right, and they don't care about the mosaic floor and anything, right? What do they care about this? Right, they have more pressing problems in life, right? So this was made by the rebels, right, as some sort of shelf or table of some sort. Now, if King Herod wanted to have a bath, we can do that for you, King Herod, no problem, right? You just take some water from the cistern over here, right? And you can see the two holes, right, in the side of the wall that allows the rainwater that's collected from the roof into it. Take the water, and then you put it in the bathtub that's built into the wall over here. Now say that Herod wants to have, let me get out of your way, no problem. Say that Herod wants to have a hot bath. We can do that, and he wants to keep the water hot. No problem, Herod, we can do that for you. You just have a little bit of a fire brewing on in this room over here, right? Heats up the wall, right? Heating up the water that's inside. Right, no problem for you. Also notice again the geometric pattern, right, in that little bathroom area, right, the sort of square designs. Right, now over here we see his triclinium, right, lounge area, so to speak, where you would have 3 sofas, and you can see more than half of this design, unfortunately, is gone, being destroyed, right? But assuming it's symmetrical, you can just imagine, right, what the other half of it would have looked like. Just really, really amazing. Archaeologists think that maybe the rebels or Romans or robbers at some later period in time, they thought maybe there was like a buried treasure underneath this floor, and that's why they start ripping it up, right? And eventually they give up because they realize there's nothing there. But because they did this, it allows us to see a little bit better of how the mosaic artist does his job and how he keeps straight lines. Right, underneath, just above like the cobblestone, you see like a layer of plaster, okay? And on this layer of plaster, you see these lines, okay? And you follow these lines, and they match up directly, right, with a specific type of mosaic design right on the floor, right? And this is how they keep everything nice and straight. On the other side of this wall was like a little elevated platform, a bima, where maybe this is like Herod's throne room, where he needed to do state business or anything like this, right? He sits on the throne over there and dispenses justice with his amazing wisdom.